Vanity Fair has turned on them, Piers. Vanity Fair with a hit piece on her in particular, writing all about how she's a diva, which some of us have known and have been talking about, and how people can't handle working for her. How, okay, I want to get the quote. Let's see. Stand by. Okay. Two sources say a colleague with ties to Archetypes, her podcast, took a leave of absence after working on 3 episodes, then left Gimlet, the podcast producer, altogether. Several others described taking extended breaks from work to escape scrutiny, meaning from her, exiting their job or undergoing long-term therapy after working with Megyn. The person who interacted professionally with her says, I think if Megyn acknowledged her own shortcomings or personal contributions to situations, rather than staying trapped in a victim narrative, her perception might be better. And going on to say the prince and the starlet, according to Vanity Fair, have become local villains in Montecito. Quoting someone as saying, they are the most entitled, disingenuous people on the planet. They moved from England to get away from the scrutiny of the press, supposedly, and all they do is try to get in the press in the United States. So what does all this tell us?
What it tells us is, rather comically, that when you have this couple who, remember on their website, it says that they're all about compassion. They're compassionate people. They're also all about mental health and helping people with mental health. They've been very vocal about that recently, about the perils of online trolling and the effect it has on people's mental health. And yet here we are with Vanity Fair, the Hollywood Bible, the thing that Meghan was most thrilled about getting the cover of a few years ago when she got engaged to Harry, which went down very badly with the palace at the time, I can tell you. But now it reveals that actually she in particular is a nasty little bully who sends staff into therapy. Think about that for a moment. This also follows all the stories about her bullying staff over here in the UK. Which is unresolved. NDAs stopped all that stuff coming out, but she bullied people in a very unpleasant way over here. So it's no surprise to people who work at Buckingham Palace. They saw and witnessed all this here. So I just showed, look, they're a pair of hypocrites, they're a pair of chancers, as the Spotify guy called them, a pair of effing grifters. And they're desperately trying to maintain some kind of future as a renegade royal couple when they're no longer part of the royal family. The royals don't talk to them. The king does not talk to his own son. None of the senior royals talk to these two. They are total pariahs in the family because the only currency they have is trashing the royal family and the monarchy. And every time they try and do something else, nobody cares. No one cared about their podcast series. Nobody cared about the polo series recently. Nobody cared about any of it. All they want to hear is the dirt. And these two for 5 years have reveled and wallowed in royal dirt for vast amounts of money. And that's what makes Prince Harry's ongoing campaign against the UK newspapers, which had another flare-up this week, so laughably hypocritical, because he talks about intrusion into royal privacy. And yet, if you ask any senior member of the royal family, who has invaded your privacy the worst, it's Prince Harry. It's the guy who gave the inside track for money to Oprah, to Netflix, to his publishers, to anyone who would pay top dollar. This guy invaded the privacy of his family. And yet he has the gall to present himself as some great standard bearer of ethics and decency when it comes to royal privacy. Do me a favor.
Right. Sooner or later, everybody turns on them. It seems like just all they need is exposure. All they need is time. She's bullied almost all of her staff out of the job. They all wind up leaking to the press what a horrid nightmare she was to work with. And the other piece in the Vanity Fair article, which was amazing, was about him and how neither one of them showed up with any ideas on what to do. Like, actually, how are we going to earn all this money? And that one of the ideas for the podcast that he had was that he would get people like Vladimir Putin and Mark Zuckerberg to sit with him. But it wasn't because he said everybody's got damage in their childhood. And I had damage in my childhood too. So you're thinking, okay, all right, I guess he's going to use that to bond with them. No, the conclusion was that their experiences had made them into sociopaths, according to Harry. And he wanted to explore how they became sociopaths, but he remained totally normal and was not, quote, one of these bad guys. And Vanity Fair pointing out, trying to get a season's worth of world-famous sociopaths to talk about how they developed sociopathy would be what is referred to in access journalism as a booking challenge.
I mean, they're just so completely deluded. That's the thing that always strikes me. It's utter delusion. And they're also just shocking hypocrites. So do you remember when they were lecturing us all about carbon footprint and climate change? And then they were using Elton John and George Clooney's private planes like taxi services. They actually, on the day of her $500,000 baby shower in New York, attended by all the great and good ladies of New York, that was the same day that from their then Twitter account, they lectured the British people about poverty. I mean, you couldn't make it up. And now what's happened, I mean, what's most laughable of all, in a sort of horrible way, is that she's got this new series where she's trying to be the new Martha Stewart, where she's going to be cooking in her fancy mansion for all her fancy friends, very fancy food. Can you imagine a less appropriate thing in California right now than this fake princess, this duchess trading off the title she got given by an institution she's tried to ruin, actually prancing about in this kitchen in a multi-million-dollar mansion with her famous friends in California when 12 to 14,000 people have just lost their homes in the most horrendous fires that the city's ever had in Los Angeles and that the state's ever seen. It is so unbelievably inappropriate that that series could go ahead, but I bet it does.
Vanity Fair just did what the British press has been too polite to say out loud for years. And the fact that it came from Vanity Fair, one of the most celebrity-friendly publications on the planet, tells you everything you need to know about where Meghan and Harry actually stand right now. This isn't a hit piece from a tabloid. This is the establishment turning its back on them. And that changes everything. Let's be honest about what happened with Spotify and Netflix, because the mainstream media keeps dancing around it. These weren't just disappointing results. This was a historic failure of branding, and branding was supposedly the whole point. Harry and Meghan left the royal family with one asset: their story. They sold that story to Netflix. They sold it to Spotify. And after hundreds of millions of dollars in deals, the output was, what exactly? One docuseries that felt more like a therapy session than a cultural moment. One podcast that got canceled before it ever found its footing. Here's the brutal truth no one wants to say. They weren't worth the money. And Hollywood figured it out before the public did. ***. Netflix didn't renew them out of charity. They didn't renew them because the numbers didn't justify it. In an industry where your value is measured in clicks, streams, and engagement, they were invisible. Now here's where it gets really interesting and really damning. Because it's one thing to fail at business. Plenty of celebrities flame out. That's survivable. But what Vanity Fair apparently reveals isn't just what went wrong, it's how they treated people along the way. And this is a pattern, not a one-off. We've heard it from palace staff. We've heard it from production teams. We've heard it from people who worked closely with them across multiple continents. There is a consistent thread running through all of it. A massive gap between the public image of compassion and the private reality of control. ***. When even your most sympathetic allies in the media start sourcing these stories, you have a problem that PR cannot fix. Here's why this specific story matters beyond the gossip. Vanity Fair is not the Daily Mail. Vanity Fair is the publication that put Meghan on its cover in 2017 and helped launch her global image makeover. They were part of building the Sussex brand. When they publish a cover story that unloads on you, that's not criticism. That's an obituary. It signals that the cultural elite, the very people Harry and Meghan were trying to court in Hollywood, in the philanthropic world, in progressive media circles, have made their decision. The experiment is over. The brand is toxic. And nobody wants to be the last one holding the bag. And this is where I want to push back on the easy narrative, because it's not just about Meghan, and it's not just about Harry. This is a story about what happens when victimhood becomes a business model. They built an entire empire on a single premise. Asterisk, we left because we were wronged, and the world should care. Asterisk. And for a while, it worked. The Oprah interview, the Netflix deal, the book, the podcast, billions in free press coverage. But victimhood has a shelf life. The public has a tolerance threshold. And once you've told the story, once you've cashed the check, the only move is to do something with it. They didn't. And now, without the royal drama to fuel the fire, there's nothing left to sell. So here's the question I want to leave you with, and I want you to actually think about this. If the royal family announced tomorrow that they were welcoming Harry and Meghan back into the fold, would Harry and Meghan actually say yes? Asterisk, asterisk. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Without the estrangement, without the grievance, without the outsider narrative, they have no brand. The drama isn't a side effect of their story. The drama is their story. And if it ends, so do they. Drop your answer in the comments. Because I genuinely think the answer reveals everything about what this was always really